Good afternoon. I'm Marcus Pask, and I'm from the Netherlands today. And welcome to Talent Unplugged Across the Pond, the show where we dive into the honest and often messy truth about hiring.
Good morning. I'm Megan Conlon from Houston, Texas. And this is the show coming to you from two continents, two perspectives, one unfiltered conversation about how we look at the recruiting industry.
Amazing. Well, we're here, episode 5, and we have a new guest on the podcast. And I have the pleasure of introducing someone who I reported into during my time at Expedia Travel Group, and an experienced talent acquisition leader. And I personally, and I know Megan as well, couldn't be more excited to introduce James Hawkes. James started his recruiting career in a recruitment agency, which we will touch on in a little bit, many years ago, and then moved to car rental space with Avis Budget Group and Zipcar, and then later he joined Expedia, which is where he became my manager in London. James spent the last 8 years at Expedia, taking on numerous roles across talent acquisition space, and we're excited to have him here with us today. Welcome, James.
Welcome, James. So nice to meet you.
Thank you for the warm welcome. It's great to meet you, Megan. Great to see you, Marcus. I'm honored to be guest number 5 in
You're guest number 2.
guest number 2.
Guest number 2.
Guest number 1 also managed both of us, so we do need to diversify our guest list here. But James, I am definitely interested in all of the tea when it came to managing Marcus in his youth, so maybe we can chat offline about all of that.
Please don't. This is that's a different podcast again that we're going to be creating. But yeah, James, I appreciate it very much that you've joined us. Like, looking at your history, I think it's going to be super important for all of our listeners as well, and all of your experience, and hopefully we can shed some light on that. But where I'd love to start is giving our listeners a bit of an overview of how you started your career in agency recruitment. What was it like those years ago? I won't say how many years ago, but a few years ago. What was it like back then working in agency?
Yeah, I mean, it was almost 20 years ago, so let me put that on the table, which is, I can't believe it myself, and it's hard to admit it. But yeah, I went into agency recruitment, and I mean, I've never met anybody who aspired to be a recruiter or go into recruiting.
Same.
When they were at school or college or anything. I wouldn't say I fell into it. It was a conscious decision. And the reason for that decision was, very candidly, I was still carrying a ton of credit card debt, my student loan.
Yeah, all of us.
The kind of the stuff that I accumulated in my gap year, having a great time traveling the world, doing the kind of the working holiday where you don't actually do that much work. And I needed to earn more money. And somebody that I knew said, oh, you could do this because you're willing to work hard and you're good with people. And that was about all I knew about agency recruitment. And so, yeah, a company called Portland Resourcing gave me a shot, and it's kind of low barrier to entry, where if you're reasonably good at kind of expressing yourself and you can hold a conversation and you can use a telephone.
Yeah.
Then you can be a new business recruitment consultant, which I didn't realize at the time. Literally walking in on day one, I didn't realize it was a sales role I was signing up for. But it was a cold desk. It was hitting the phone, 100 calls a day, being monitored on how much time you spend on the phone, that kind of thing. But a great place to learn. It taught me a lot. Especially, it taught me a lot about sales, and sales being a process. And if you follow the process, kind of money kind of comes out of the bottom. But to be able to do that, you need a huge amount of resilience and drive to keep doing things when you're being told no dozens of times a day. So yeah, that's how I started my career in recruitment. I did not think I'd still be in any way involved in recruitment all these years later. But yeah, that's how it began.
Was this at a time when agency recruitment, you were in at 7 a.m, leaving at 7 p.m, couldn't leave before your manager left, had to be in before they started, that type of agency time?
100%. Yeah, so we were 8 till 6. That was our contractual hours. And kind of, if you got in at 7:59 in the morning, that was probably a little bit frowned on.
Yeah.
Likely my first boss will see this, I think, because he's retired, but I don't think he would mind me telling the story about him sending me emails about what bit of 8 o'clock don't you understand? If I got in at like 8:03.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it was very much focused on your hard work and output. It wasn't all bad in the sense of, there was some appreciation for people who working hard and trying their best, even if the results didn't come immediately, which is kind of the case for me. Ultimately, I did quite well, but there's a steep learning curve when you've never done it before. It was great, and yeah, as I say, I learned a lot from that experience.
And what was the industry that you were recruiting for at that time?
It was so we specialized in SAP functional consultants. So SAP was really on the rise at the time, implementations into huge corporate clients. And so our specialism was the guys who were going in there building that system for them. And it's so funny looking back that I had no idea what SAP as a
Yeah.
system, as a user even looked like, let alone had any real knowledge in it. But back in the day, this is all about kind of who a little bit of kind of control F recruitment, like looking for keywords on resumes. I'm slightly embarrassed to admit, but that did go
Control
on
F.
back in that day. And I think maybe later we'll talk about how TA has evolved, but
Yeah.
recruitment in the mid 2000s, there was still a lot of that for sure.
Yeah,
Were you
absolutely.
using a what was it called, like a Filofax system for finding
Not
people? Not quite then.
quite. I will tell you, yeah, we had a good kind of database that they were really strict on kind of data quality, and that was part of the success of that business, I think. But I'll tell you how old school it was. We had the business had one central email inbox.
Oh, wow.
One person's a big part of his job was to kind of forward emails to the right consultant, or then forward our replies back to candidates and clients. Unbelievable to think about that now, but this was I think a kind of a control thing of being able to monitor what we were doing, and coming from a recent past where there wasn't so much on email, because more would have been picking up the phone.
Right.
So if that was a bit of a kind of a period of change, I suppose.
What would you say during that time you did take with you into your in-house experience?
I definitely took with me that kind of delivery pressure. So I had a financial target on my back, especially once I was established. And it could be a little bit difficult and kind of cutthroat, that if you persistently miss that target, well, you lose your job.
Yeah.
And so I probably carry a little bit of emotional baggage with me of like kind of, I don't think I'll ever be able to deal with someone sending me a short notice meeting for like 5 p.m. on a Friday.
Same.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
Somebody was
Some
getting
serious
fired.
trauma there.
Yeah. But it taught me about delivery, and kind of, I grew up professionally with that kind of no excuses mindset. I've got to get this done.
Yeah.
And when you go in house,
Yeah.
there's a very different kind of pressure. I've always, when I've hired for my teams, been quite keen on people who have that agency experience, because I know the kind of the pressure that they've been under, and how they've had to execute kind of no matter what. We're much kind of nicer in-house and in the corporate world, and give people a lot more time, and we also give them a lot more kind of coaching and development, and really invest and back people. But knowing that they've experienced that, it's not like a prerequisite for me when I recruit, but it can be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found I came from an agency background as well before moving in-house. And I found that the metrics and the essentially smile and dial foundations, although volume is not king to quality of candidate that you're putting on your calendar, but that constant reinforcement of just do this process and the results will be there, I took with me into all of my coaching and training for any recruiter that I've had in-house. And I think that resilience piece that you've touched on as well is integral to being a good recruiter, regardless of whether you're agency or in-house. What was interesting for me with my agency experience as well, and James, you've touched on this a bit, is there's a lot of transparency around everyone else's performance, which you don't necessarily have in-house. I like that we sort of keep that more personal and between manager and direct report. But we had what we called red zones twice a day, which is a football term. And every morning and every afternoon after lunch, our director of business would get up on a whiteboard and go through every single customer or every single
Wow.
contract that we had. And every single account manager would talk about whatever progress they had made in the last 6 hours.
Yeah.
And then commissions reports were sent every 2 weeks. And so you saw exactly how everyone was doing in that office. And I always found that terrifying, very motivating, but also terrifying.
We had the same actually when I first joined Hayes. This was one of my first jobs. We had the same, just a leaderboard, and it was there. Like
exactly.
at the end of every Friday, who's top of the leaderboard, who's not, and there was 100 of us on the floor, and you would see this list, and then you would see like top 10, and you'd see bottom 10, and if you are in that bottom 10, then you just know the pressure is on you for the next week, 2 weeks to get out of that bottom 10. But yeah, as you mentioned, Megan, like it gets you on the phone, it gets you speaking to people. And I think it really actually gets you to learn what makes a good conversation with a candidate. It gets you to find the right people. And then you really start to drill down on what makes a great conversation with someone and build up that confidence of just having a call with someone that you've never spoken to, that you're cold calling and be like, hey, have a conversation with me, and all of those things. I think it really adds a lot of value. I love it. I actually still enjoyed it.
I do too. I would say, though, that one of the main differences, and maybe we can chat with James about this as he transitions into his later experience, but being an agency recruiter is about the numbers. You don't have the relationships with your customers or with your clients the same way we do in-house. We don't know intimately the business reason that this hire needs to be made and what are the nuances of bringing that particular person on board, and what's the culture at, and how to really sell the role. If you're in-house, you have some skin in the game there. Whereas as an agency recruiter, especially if you're early in your career, it is all about the numbers. It's a numbers game, which is what agency recruiting, that sort of operating rhythm teaches you, is just the numbers will be there, but the actual qualification of the right fit at the right time, not so important as an agency recruiter.
Really
at least not that type of high volume agency recruiter.
And James, what led you then, because we're kind of on this topic, you were in agency, what led you to go from agency to in-house?
Megan's just touched on a bit of it, actually, I think, which was I was beginning to feel like maybe at some point I'd like to do something not so sales focused, not about just kind of, billing at all costs, which was really the environment that I was in. I think what brought it to a head for me was I had this moment. It was a watershed moment for me in my life where I cleared those debts that I mentioned. And it was actually just that day thinking, okay, and it was my student loan was the last thing to go. And a fire kind of went out in me. Where I thought I can't just do this for that kind of short-term cash. Money was always going to be important. I mean, of course, it's important to all of us to some extent, but it was my primary driver for a couple of years. Like nothing else really mattered, and I was and I've had some really good experiences in that time of working with really great clients and wishing that I could kind of work with them more and more consistently rather than kind of dipping in and out when they had a need. And so I guess I was leading towards going in-house ultimately. I didn't immediately, in fact, not for several years, but it led me to something that was kind of a bit more boutique, where there was more of a focus on long-term client relationships. And that kind of started the transition, I suppose. It took me a while to get there. And actually, I don't know if we're going to talk about how TA and recruiting has changed over the years, but at that point, in-house talent acquisition didn't really exist, I don't think. But most of those people were doing kind of really recruitment administration and managing suppliers. So it took a while for that to even be an option, really, to go in-house as a recruiter. But that came later for me.
Probably a good place to start. How has it changed during that time? Because for me, it's changed a lot. I think where we were those years ago to now, and agency recruitment's changed massively as well. But in-house, we are so much more strategic than we used to be. We're really part of those conversations a lot more. But from your side, what's your experience of how that change has happened?
Yeah, I mean, really beyond recognition in that time, I think. when I started recruiting in general, I mean, I was on the kind of the sales side of it, and it's find a way to make money. But if you think about it in terms of business impact, it's essentially, at the time it was purely requisition driven. It's I need a role filled, and somebody, whether they're internal or external, is going to post it,
Yeah.
and screen CVs, manage a process. The tools are really basic, patchy data, if any, not much rigor around hiring decisions. I think,
No.
mostly intuition led.
Yeah. 100%.
And over that time, we've become more specialized, more strategic. We've begun to, well, this is what we all do now, but we began to actually partner with the business on not just, okay, you say you want this, let me find it for you.
Yeah.
We'll have conversations about what do you actually need, what works for the team. And then we began to bring data in and have a seat at the table when we're talking about workforce planning, location strategy, those kind of things, rather than just being order takers. And now we're moving into a world where we need to become even more sophisticated, where we use analytics and AI to kind of become predictive in a broader ecosystem that's around skills, internal deployment and mobility, employer brand, and so on. So we've been on a heck of a journey over those years, I think.
It's true. You've touched on a few bits there, like employer brand. This was not part of a internal role those years ago.
Yeah.
We wouldn't even know what that was. It's like, give that to marketing, give that to a social media team. Like, what are you on about employer brand? Why are we taking this on? But it makes sense that we're now a part of that. And that is probably a really good evolution of what our roles have become into as well.
Yeah. And it's become so much more interesting and exciting. But I was thinking about, because you and I worked together not that many years ago, Marcus.
No.
But even in that time, our expectations of recruiters are, I think it's night and day. That what we ask of our teams now and ourselves, our kind of first line people leaders, is a whole level different than what it was those 8 years ago.
Yeah, we didn't really have, we were just touching on it, but we didn't have things like engagement surveys that were going out to recruiters or to hiring managers. We weren't asking necessarily for that level of feedback. You would maybe get it once a year in a performance review, whereas now it's every hire, there's a survey that will go out. This is probably new to a lot of people actually that might be listening, that anytime there is a hire, we want to send a survey out because we want your feedback so that we can then adjust our process, so that we can adjust our careers page. We can decide whether the right interview is happening, if it's too many, too short. That feedback comes through, and then we get the same from hiring managers. And then we also do surveys for new joiners. You've just joined the business 3 months later, 6 months later, here's a survey. How did you find it? Are you happy? There's so much evolution that's gone on that was not part of our role 7 years ago. That again would have gone to a data team or to someone else, and we would just get asked, send this every few months, whereas now it's repeated almost every single time. Yeah. You're probably seeing it in your world as well. Now you're head of talent. And because it's new, you're also then figuring out, how do I create a development plan for my team on this? Because we're also learning about it ourselves to then create meaningful training and development and all of those other bits that get added onto it.
Yeah.
There's a ton that's changed.
James, when did you transition into people leadership?
Gosh, I'm trying to think exactly when that happened. It was when I was with Avis Budget Group, and I had this amazing opportunity to go across to Zipcar, who, for anyone who's not familiar, they're car sharing business, and Avis bought Zipcar, and the international Zipcar business was headquartered in London, and was still very much a startup in terms of where it was in its growth, and how it operated. And so, I was kind of sent across to do what I'd been involved with at Avis, which was really building TA, so careers website, ATS. Avis didn't have that when I joined in 2013. My boss at the time, Ross Fernandez, I was his first hire in the door to help him, support him do all of that. And then I went to do that for Zipcar as a subsidiary. And there I had to build things from scratch and began to manage a small team. And that was other than some of my tenure at Expedia, it was some of the most fun I've had in my professional life. Incredibly fast-paced, kind of chaotic, because startups are scrappy. Everyone has to do a bit of everything.
Yep.
And to get it off the ground, I had to manage a small team. And you really learn by doing, I think, especially in people management. And that was definitely a steep learning curve. Nothing had really prepared me for that, other than the experience of working for good and less good leaders.
Yeah, we've definitely all learned that.
Yeah. So that was that transition. And I suppose it wasn't immediately that I thought, oh, actually, I really love doing this. And I see myself as a leader and someone who wants to take on more responsibility in this area. But over time began to think, actually, I think this is where I want to go, is to lead larger teams. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do that.
And that's when you came to Expedia?
Yeah. So there's a couple of moves within the group. I had a really small team at Zipcar, moved back to the parent company with some restructuring. And I was really lucky to be kind of given a bigger role where I kept my Zipcar part of the portfolio, but also had a few other things. And then had I guess it was a team of nine or 10 at that point. Yeah. And then Expedia, I was going to say came calling, and they definitely didn't. It didn't come calling. It was I thought they were the coolest company in the world and I wanted to work for them. And the second time that I applied, got an interview, ultimately couldn't believe my luck when I got the job. And it didn't disappoint, honestly. As you know, Marcus, those first couple of years especially was incredible growth.
Yeah.
Obviously kind of insane hard work. And I think what we delivered for the business was honestly phenomenal at the time, but it was a great place to work, and it still is, having recently left. But yeah, that's what led me to Expedia.
And it was during that time that a CV of a Marcus Pask came across your desk.
I was already there. Yeah, I was. Thank God, because I don't think I would have made it through otherwise. I
inherited Marcus, and no, in all seriousness. So Ryan, who was the manager who hired me, I think he hired you as well, Marcus, a couple of years before.
Yeah.
And he'd given me a pretty good write-up of the team. It was like, there's quite a lot of talent here, actually. We need to build, and there's a few things that we can work on, but actually the level of talent is pretty strong, which was the case. And he was very positive about Marcus, and he was absolutely right. We had a lot to do in those early months and first couple of years, and you were integral to that.
Thank you very much. I mean, we did a ton of hiring. Like we were doing double what we'd done years before. I think the other nice thing to that as well is that it wasn't just the recruitment side, it wasn't just the work side, but outside of work, we had a great team bonding. We would socialize, we would celebrate wins, we would celebrate pregnancies, we'd celebrate birthdays. It would just be whatever there was. We had a real good team around us. But we also knew that when it came to work, we would work hard, like during those hours, and get everything that was needed so that we could be at the pub for 4:30, 5 o'clock on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday each time.
That actually jogged my memory that prior to us all sheltering in place in COVID, my previous roles where I was in office 5 days a week, we did the same thing.
Yeah.
We were celebrating birthdays, desks were decorated for celebrations, and we rang bells when people closed candidates, just like when sales closed a deal and went out for happy hours. I think some of that's been lost.
That was so much fun back then. And I miss that as well, doing the remote stuff. I think having that team that's around you every single day, you really do create an extra second family, I always feel.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. My question to James, what do you think are some of the qualities or skills that makes a great recruiter? Like, who would you be really jumping to hire for your next team?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really try to check my own bias when I'm hiring and think, well, let's be really broad about what kind of person and personality is going to fit, because it's great to have a range of different capabilities and styles and personalities. So I think it can look very different from one person to another. The things that I would index really heavily on are how smart they are and how curious they are, I think. Those two things kind of go hand in hand, but someone who's asking really kind of intelligent questions, not so much that they show that they've done their homework, although that's good. You want people to show genuine interest, but being able to ask things that I've not thought of, or really show a genuine kind of intellectual capacity and curiosity about what we're doing, because they're going to need that, especially, I just said earlier about our expectations of them are so high now. We're asking them to go in and, thinking about my Expedia context, talk to senior director and VP hiring managers, senior execs with big remits, and be credible with those people. You're going to need to kind of get under the skin of what does that job function kind of mean? What does the team do? What are their priorities? And within that, there's a range. I think there's a range of kind of backgrounds and capabilities that can work, but those are the most critical things that I'm looking for, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And not to forget, just the communication skills.
Yeah.
People don't need to be a raging extrovert. I'm not, and didn't pretend to be when I was doing okay as a recruiter. But you got to be good with people, able to hold down a good conversation. Everything else, I think, you can kind of work on, including people's confidence. I think that was a big thing for me, and why I loved being a people leader, was that I could help people with that. But those foundational things, the communication, intellect, and curiosity.
Megan, we touched on it. You've just built your A team that's getting ready to start very soon. Is there anything that's been different for you when you've been building that team that you've looked for?
It's very similar to what James has just mentioned. Those people skills are incredibly important. The curiosity, going a level deeper with your questions, being genuinely interested in the business that you're supporting, especially if you're going to be in-house. I would say that depending on the seniority of the recruiter that you are placing on your team and the specific remit James mentioned, we're specializing more now, tech versus business, go-to-market versus post-sales, engineering versus product or design. That's when you start getting into, well, maybe you need a bit of actual experience in X, or you need to have supported specific parts of the business. That just means that you're going to be an easier plug and play for us and be likely more effective more quickly for the team. So that's what in my current team makeup, I have one more senior recruiter that's joining that definitely had more of that apples to apples experience. And then I also have another recruiter joining that is a bit of a more atypical profile that's coming in. And I think they're both going to be exceptional. That remains to be seen. Neither have started yet, but both had curiosity, great communication skills, and grit in spades. So, yeah.
And kind of links to this, because we're talking about, bringing on new people in the market right now. James, you've obviously just left Expedia after spending many years there and took some time off, and now you're actively in the market. For someone that's worked in TA for so long, what do you think of the market in today's world? What's it been like actively searching for a new role?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I guess I wasn't sure what to expect. Has it been so long since I've been on the market?
Yeah.
And I guess in terms of my experience, fair bit more senior than I was the last time I went through all of this. So, and I'd heard a lot of kind of doom and gloom about the market, which isn't entirely wide of the mark. I mean, in the sense that, yes, it is challenging out there. There's a lot of disruption and change in the industry, as I've just experienced moving on from EG. And so, yeah, and what you can see, and I don't think this is specific to TA or HR in any way, I think it's probably the case across the board, that it's also really competitive, because there are probably more people than ever who are brilliant at what they do, who don't currently have a role. And so, those of us in a position of looking are probably going to have to be resilient and persistent and keep showing up. And that's a kind of a personal thing that kind of guides me in and outside of work, of like, just, you got to keep showing up and don't underestimate the person who keeps doing that. But it's, yeah, I guess I don't want to sugarcoat in the sense that it's not hard, because I think it is a little bit tough out there. And so people need the right advice as you're giving them, and need to continue to show up well. And so, yeah, that's my experience of the market at the moment. And I'm fortunate I'm involved in a couple of processes. So there is stuff out there. It's not flatlining, but you just got to keep going, I guess.
I think this is a good dovetail into our myth busting for today. So I have lots of questions for James and for Marcus about this myth. Listeners, our myth today with James is, if I submit an application, I'm not getting a call. So James, my question to you, actually, since you just mentioned you're in a couple interview processes, did you apply for any of the interview processes that you're in?
So this is an interesting one. One of them I did, but there's some nuance there that I also want I want to share because I think it's an important lesson for all of us, and it may not ultimately go anywhere, right? But yeah, one was they found me, and then a few conversations I've had in the last few months is they've come to me.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to kind of keep yourself honest, and this is my advice to anyone who's looking for a role: is absolutely you should apply, and you shouldn't turn it into a full-time job, kind of scouring job boards, because it doesn't take that much time in the day, and you got to do other things to keep yourself sane. But there's one of the two processes I'm involved in at the moment. Yeah, I applied, I saw it, and I thought that sounds good. But going back a couple of weeks, purely coincidentally and not connected in my mind in any way at the time, somebody reached out to me saying that he was building a kind of this people tech product, and as a TA leader, he'd value my thoughts and feedback. I guess I wasn't necessarily hugely feeling like doing that kind of thing at the time, because, when you're looking for a role, you're kind of focused on yourself a little bit. But I felt like it was important to kind of give someone the time of day if they're asking for it. Had a good conversation with him, really pleasant actually, gave him my feedback on what he was looking for, and he off the back of that made a couple of introductions. And so I won't bore you with all of the details, but there was a couple of coincidences, and he made this introduction, which I think probably led to me being considered in that process, or it may well have had an impact, right? And so this is a precursor to saying, I think you should absolutely leverage connections where you have them.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so when you apply, if you know who the job poster is, or even if you think you know who that might be, why not send them a short, upbeat message on LinkedIn or email to introduce yourself? Just get yourself front of mind. If you know somebody who works there, or if you have a connection, leverage that. The way I think of it is you're just kind of increasing your surface area for a bit of luck along the way. And if you just kind of strictly kind of follow the process in terms of, I'll submit an application and I'll wait to hear, that's fine. It might work out, but you're leaving a lot to chance, I think.
I'm so glad you said that, because that is what Marcus and I talked about in our last episode around the cover letter being essentially obsolete, and in-mails and using your network and finding out who the hiring manager is or the recruiting partner is that's working on that rec is going to likely get you farther than spending time on a cover letter. That's so interesting to hear, though. So it sounds like it's yes and. So continue to apply, but also leverage your network. And I think Marcus and I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I think something to give our listeners light at the end of the tunnel. I pulled our sourced hire list before this call. So essentially, where did we find the hires that we made this year at MITRE? And we're a small Series B SaaS company. We just made our 100th hire.
Congratulations.
Thank you. There's only 2 of us so far, so that was quite the feat this year. But we've made 62 hires this year, and 40% of them came from applicants.
Yeah.
There will always be certain roles where hiring managers prefer the specialized candidate that have come from other people's networks, where we can speak firsthand about this person's performance, their credibility, how they would fit on the team. It mitigates some risk than an applicant that maybe no one has worked with on the team before. But I can debunk that myth and say that at least 40% of our hires at MITRE came from applicants. I know that I'm working on a couple of our senior recs right now. We're excited about a handful of folks that applied that did not come from my sourcing efforts. I'm seeing a lot of AI tools on the market right now where you can just mass apply to roles, and please don't do that. Don't spam companies. Do your research.
I would take the same. I was I'm supporting a startup, another thing that I'm doing right now. And part of that conversation, there are about 10 of us right now that are working across leadership TA roles or have been at different companies. And we actually touched on this topic. We were talking about inbound, outbound, all of those types of things. And all of them were saying it's still 30-40% of their hires are being made by applicants through a job board or on a careers page. It's still happening. And these TA leaders are based all across Europe. So it's not just saying this is for Spain or for the Netherlands. They're based in Germany. They're based in the UK. There's one person from the US. So it's consistent across the board. But as you said, don't just spam every single company. It concerns me that I've seen on Instagram and a few other places that a few people saying, yeah, I just applied for 500 jobs today and got AI to do it. Like, please don't do this. It's not helping anyone. And actually it's not helping people that are actually suitable for that job, because it's wasting people's time. But yeah, I think that's going to be a future AI problem we're going to continue to see as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead, James.
Sorry, I was just going to answer that from the candidate perspective with my recent experience as well. I've been there. A couple of weeks ago, I applied for something. I saw something that I thought was really actually quite a strong fit and applied, and then a day later had an email rejection. It was one of those where you think, "Are you sure that wasn't worth a conversation?" But you never know, right? You just don't know what. I don't know who else applied, right? And as much as I think I'm strong and I'm great, there could be other people in the mix who work for exactly the same type of business. They may have connections, like I mentioned, that they were able to leverage.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't mean that there's this myth that AI is screening you out or nobody's reviewing. Speaking from experience of leading a TA team, that's not the reality. People are applying and people are getting hired. Yes, the market's a bit squeezed at the moment and you're going to have to keep trying, but it's not that nobody's looking at you and applications are pointless.
And I think maybe you have an interesting perspective for candidates around the job boards that they apply for. James, do you think job boards are dead? Should people just apply on careers pages? How legitimate are job boards?
Yeah, I think job boards still play a role. And I know from our channel mix at Expedia, and I'm sure this is the case across other businesses, that they still ROI for the business on those. And we do it for a reason. And increasingly, enterprises like Expedia are making sure that they get ROI from this. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. So I definitely think, that you should be considering other avenues. If there's something industry specific or location specific, look at those as well, because there's a reason that companies post on them.
Yeah, I can say at MITRE, because we are a specialized industry and we don't have the employer brand yet of, the Metas and the Googles of the world. We host on 5 or 6 job boards and pay to have presence on them for those candidates specifically that we know live in those networks. So I would agree. I would agree. It's not a waste of time to look at job boards, especially ones that are specific maybe to the industry or stage of company that I was passively seeking last fall, was because the volume of applications can be daunting when a role is first posted. Try to be within the first 50 to 100 applicants if you can. So have your LinkedIn notifications set for the specific roles that you're interested in so that you can be one of the first to apply.
Yeah.
I know that I got a couple of calls being
that early.
Probably the first 50 people to apply. Anything else?
I mean, from my side, like obviously I'm job search coach on the side of this, and I advise people to actually start planning how their week might look. I don't want it to be really regimented. If they're solely focusing on the travel industry as a place that they want to work, okay, focus on that for like week 1. And then if you're not getting anything, then look into a new industry and try and open up your mind around where you might be suitable, or look at different sectors. So instead, try and expand it out and learn what's out there and do some reading and learn what are the fastest growing companies, or learn what are the best places to work for a mother, or best places to work if you have children. There's so much out there in terms of documentation or just newspaper articles or anything like that. I think do your research and try and, like James, you kind of touched on at the beginning, it can be a full-time job, but try and not make it a full-time job, and actually use your time appropriately to get into as many fields as you possibly can. That would be some advice I'd give.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think, you're obviously giving great advice to people and kind of putting some meat on the bones of how should you look for a new role. But I really, strongly feel, and I'm going to say we both said it now, but don't make it into a full-time job, because you drive yourself insane.
Yeah.
Doing that. And then if I can be a little bit kind of, almost a little bit woo for a second, um, you need to give yourself some other purpose.
Yeah.
And for some of us, that's okay. We can spend more time with our kids and be more invested in that than maybe we were able to um, when we were working full time, that kind of thing. But spend your time. There's so much personal development that you can
Yeah.
do with the other few hours of the day. And so whether that's kind of, I don't know, starting to learn Spanish or get out and go for a run, don't get sucked into too far into kind of Netflix, because
Yeah.
you'll
That's a different rabbit hole. It's the Netflix rabbit hole.
there's a time and a place for all of
Yeah.
that as well. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
The best at evenings and weekends, like it was when you were working.
But James, you touch on such a good point, especially the longer that somebody may be searching for their next role, more important it becomes to stay somehow up to speed on your skills and trends for the
Yep.
industry. I know one question that my team asks of folks that have been laid off and have been on the job market for a little while is, so what have you been doing in between your last role and the role that you're looking for now? And what we're looking for is not that I was bedridden and watching Netflix for the last 6 months. Spending time with my family is wonderful, or, training for something is great. But the answers we love to hear is, oh, I was upskilling myself in AI, or I was on podcasts, sharing my knowledge. We want to hear that you've kept yourself sharp during the time that you've been off. And that also likely helps with your confidence showing up in an interview process as well, if you haven't taken a significant amount of time away from the role that you're applying for.
I completely agree, and I think there's so much opportunity for you to come back sharp and more knowledgeable than you were, because when you're working full time, it's very difficult to find the time for the kind of personal development. But if you're spending 2 or 3 hours on the job search each day, I mean, what excuse is there for not reading a chapter of a personal development book in your relevant field, or doing joining a webinar or something? If you stack up those wins day after day, then you'll be a different person in 6 months. And I think it is very good for your confidence each day to achieve something.
Yeah. I think you touched on a bit. What is a win for that day? What is a win for the week? And pick up those, and it will soon start to build into something more.
Yeah.
I think that's it for this episode. So I'd like to say thank you, James, for joining us on episode 5. Really appreciate all of your insights, and we both wish you luck with your current search as well. Please keep us posted so that we can share it with our audience at a later date.
Please. And if there's anything that we can do connection-wise, network-wise, since we've just talked about that, please let us know. We'd love to help.
That's very kind. I appreciate that. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to both of you. Thank you. Really appreciate and admire what you're doing. And it's been, like I said, an honor to be guest number 2.
So that's it for this episode of Talent Unplugged Across the Pond. We hope you enjoyed listening, and we look forward to more stories, myth busting, and everything in between. So it's goodbye from me.
It's a goodbye from me.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.